Mosquito Control for Miami-Dade County.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I'm pleased to be here.
So we know the mosquito season is going to happen pretty soon. When does the season officially begin?
Good question. Season used to be May to November. That's not as predictable as it used to be. So the season starts when the rains start.
April showers bring May flowers?
So one important thing about that aspect, when you get small amounts of rain, frequent showers before the rain season starts proper, that's enough rain to bring off our most important disease carrier. But you need a lot more rain than that to then produce the other mosquitoes that we're familiar with in the summer months.
So, and for mosquito control, you guys, do you pick different parts of the county where you get phone calls, or how do you know where to go spray?
So that's a great question. And it really brings me to, a lot of people don't realize there's so much science based on mosquito control. It's not just pest control, like spraying routinely every 2 weeks or something.
And you have your PhD in mosquito biology.
Yeah.
And folks, there really is a degree and real studies that go into mosquitoes.
There are, I don't know how, many master's and PhD theses on mosquito biology. Think about the history of it. Malaria, yellow fever, when towards the end of the 19th century, when the causative agent of malaria was discovered. Remember, millions of people were dying around the world globally. Yellow fever in this part of the world, the Panama Canal, 30,000 people died. So when these things were discovered, it was a game changer, a public health issue. So there's been a long history of science in mosquito control. So mosquito control agencies, they're science-based. It's not just pest control. There's a lot of applied research goes on. In answer to your question, we have over 300 mosquito traps around the county. They're collected every week, and we have 5 lab techs who are trained to identify all of these mosquitoes.
The type of mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Can they tell by looking at it what part of Dade County it's from?
We know where the trap is. That's where it's from. So from this surveillance of 300 traps, plus 5 people highly specialized in identifying, we're then able to tell very quickly where the populations are, where they're increasing, which mosquitoes are where, which ones we've got to keep an eye on.
A couple of years ago, it seemed there was a certain type of mosquito that was over on the beach, and so they were saying, don't go to the Miami Beach. Do you remember this?
Are you referring to Zika?
Yes.
Okay.
So being the unexperienced, humorous person I am, so the mosquitoes don't get blown anywhere else. They're going to just stay in this area. So when the public officials, whoever they were saying, don't go over there, should I have laughed, or should I say, well, that science says this is where they're going to stay?
No, there is serious science behind that. Some mosquitoes have been recorded traveling up to 30 miles, the ones that come out the Everglades, for example. Most mosquitoes don't travel that sort of distance. Our public health nuisance here, the yellow fever mosquito, dengue, Zika, it's all the same mosquito. It's kind of unique in that it doesn't travel. It's only been recorded as traveling, you'll read 50 yards, 100 yards.
So the report on the beach, that's where they stay.
They stay wherever they emerge.
Yes.
So if they are born, if they're hatched, if they emerge in your backyard, they don't need to go anywhere else. They don't migrate. They only stay in the area in which the eggs were laid and they emerge.
And I know there've been a lot of studies done about rats, wild rats, that they stay within a certain distance of where they were born.
For different reasons, but yeah, it's similar thing.
It's sort of like us. Lots of times that's where you went to college, that's where you did your residency, and that's where you stay.
For this particular mosquito, though, and this is the real serious disease one, it doesn't need to leave your yard. It only takes blood from humans. It doesn't bite other animals or birds, and it only breeds around human habitation. It originally, a long time ago, was a tree hole mosquito from Africa. It's changed so much now that it's become highly adapted. So it breeds in anything that can hold water. So it's not breeding on the ground. It's breeding in buckets and drums, toys, discarded tires, anything in the yard or anywhere lying around.
So let's say you have, a food bowl in the back, for a kitty cat, there's water in there. How many little mosquitoes are going to hatch out of that?
Thousands.
How many?
Thousands.
Thousands.
Yes.
From that little thing.
Yes, easily hundreds. I just tried some recently in the lab with one of these little coffee cups that you get for the Cuban coffee. I didn't count them, but I had a couple of hundred.
In that little tiny little thing.
Yeah, and they all emerged.
And how do they duplicate, multiply? How does that work? How fast do they multiply?
The breeding cycle varies, but with that disease carrier that we're talking about, within a week, she will lay her eggs. Those eggs can hatch, and the larvae develop, within a week to 10 days.
So when we hear the county and lots of folks saying, empty out, go around your house, make sure you get rid of the extra water, that's for real.
That's sound advice. It's good advice. Now, it's only this mosquito we're talking about.
Okay.
We would not expect anyone to do anything about the mosquitoes coming out of salt marshes. Obviously, that's our job. Mosquitoes breeding in storm drains, that's a difficult one. But breeding in the backyard domestically, people can actually, if you can't get rid of water, you can turn things over. You can also use a product called BTI. It's a first sale. It's called Bits. And you can sprinkle little granules of this product into, let's say, bromeliads. Bromeliads breed these mosquitoes like nobody's business. You can't get rid of them, or if you don't want to take them out.
They literally would be tens of thousands of eggs, and if you had a patch this big of bromeliads with the water in each one of those things, or thousands.
Yes. What that mosquito does is she lays her eggs in small amounts in different containers, not laying all her eggs in the one basket. So she'll have a dozen here and have a dozen over there, and so on. It's an adaptive strategy after all. So if these don't hatch, then these might. But she's not laying them in water. She's laying these eggs on a surface, on a substrate. So if you have a cup, and we use cups for sampling all the time, she'll lay her eggs round the inside of the cup, just above the water, because she knows it's going to rain. Well, when I say that, what I mean is she's laying the eggs in anticipation of them being flooded at some point. And if you live in Miami, you're going to get rain at some point.
And so does that kill the eggs, or they float on the top until they hatch?
So these eggs are specialized. They can dry out, and they sit there and wait for the rain. When it rains, the eggs flood. Then they hatch. The larvae, the aquatic stages, the juvenile stage of the life cycle hatches, and they live in the water.
So what's a person to do? They live, and they got little kids, and they want to go outside. It's the heat of the summer, it's raining every day, and it's 85 to 90 degrees. We're sweating like crazy, and we want to go for a walk. And it's the middle of the mosquito season.
Well, you can actually do something, as I said, about in your yard. You can turn over containers or treat them with BTI bits, or even vegetable oil in your bromeliads. The other thing you're going to want to do in the scenario you describe, long sleeves, long pants, a hat perhaps, but 95 degrees outside, that's kind of
we should do what the guys do on the plant nurseries. They're walking around with all that stuff so they don't get burnt and cut up and bit up. So what are some of the challenges for the mosquitoes, excuse me, for controlling mosquitoes?
I think one of the biggest challenges for everybody in the business is insecticide resistance. A lot of mosquito species, and particularly the disease carriers, have become resistant to almost all of the chemical insecticides that have been used over the years. There are only one or two left which still have EPA approval. That's a challenge. We do have other products, and this is a much better strategy anyway, is to kill the larvae, to kill the aquatic stages. So it's preventative. You're preventing them from emerging. They don't bite. They can't transmit disease. It's easier to treat in 2 dimensions than when they're flying around. But there are not as many products available, and it's hard to get to all the breeding sites. That's the challenge, is to get, in this particular control method, the difficulty is to get your product to all of the breeding sites.
So we happen to be in the city of South Miami, and a few years ago, then Mayor Dr. Phil Stoddard got the county commission, the city commission, to send a note over to mosquito control's headquarters. Say, please do not come and spray our area. It's going to kill our butterflies and other stuff. So do people have a real health concern about the spray, whether it's from the trucks or do you do it from planes also?
We don't have an aerial program here in Miami. We have the capacity to call in a company that does aerial operations for us, but we don't have an aerial program ourselves. People are concerned about pesticides. They have every reason to be concerned about pesticides, which is one reason why we are very careful about the products we use, the application rate, the dosage. In other words, a lot of you mentioned butterflies and so on. We monitor very closely that we don't kill other insects, especially bigger insects like butterflies and dragonflies. You're not going to kill them anyway. Bees, we have to be very careful about bees so that we don't spray during the day. For example, when bees are active. Bees are one of those insects, although they're big, they are highly susceptible to pesticides. All of the pesticides we use are extremely safe for humans and pets.
So let's say you fellows out there, you have your 300 traps around the county, your 5 people look at it and they say, hey, here's the spot where we have 5 traps and we've got a lot of these mosquitoes over there. And so you look at the science of it, you say, we need to go spray over there. Is that what might happen?
Yeah, we do an inspection. We might spray, or that's not necessarily the first thing that we would do in an inspection. What you're far better off doing than spraying conventional insecticide to kill the mosquitoes flying around. As I said before, you're far better off trying to kill the larvae in the water. So that's what you would try and do. That's preventative.
So you go to the neighbors and you say, listen, we've got this 10-block area here. We know that you have a lot of mosquitoes based upon the traps that we've set. Please, how do you communicate with the homeowners?
Well, that's something that Zika definitely changed in our profession. The media, the press interest, the fact that people in mosquito control years ago did not really communicate too well with media, with the press. Zika changed that, all for the better, I must say. So we now have, for our division here in Miami-Dade County, in our division, we have 2 public information officers.
Is one of them sitting in the room?
One of them sitting right here, right.
Oh, there she is, right over there.
So
it's Monique, guys.
Hi, Monique. That's very, very important. I mean, we're making fun of it here, but that is extremely important. That's really been a big
How
change.
did Zika do that? What caused everybody to pay more attention to that?
So at a conference not long after Zika, and a colleague of ours, he's in the industry rather than the front end, gave a talk saying Zika changed everything. And it did. It was the first time the CDC had ever announced a part of the United States to be not safe to travel. The microcephaly, the public health imperative from the severity of the disease affecting newborn babies, that's a headline grabber. The economic effect on Miami, the consequences, which we had always known, but people hadn't fully, I think, realized the consequences of the economic consequences of a public health emergency like Zika.
Well, we certainly have learned about that in the last 13 months here in Miami-Dade County and across the country, how that stuff really transfers from person to person. But let's talk about, Dr. Petrie, why do mosquitoes bite?
Okay, my favorite subject. Remind me to go back to Dr. Phil Stoddart.
Okay.
Too. But why do mosquitoes bite? Mosquitoes bite to make babies. That's it, basically. Mosquitoes bite to take blood to turn into eggs. So it's a huge subject.
That's food for helping them make babies.
To make eggs.
To make eggs.
So this is a huge subject. There are many, many different types of insects that take blood. Mosquitoes are the most highly specialized and adapted at it. The mouth parts are adapted to highly specialized to pierce and then draw your blood. They have two stomachs. She has a special stomach for the blood, which is expandable. I'm sorry. It's almost elastic, the stomach. She has a special pump to be able to take this blood. Blood's almost pure protein, and it's already liquid. She doesn't have to digest it. She doesn't have to spend a lot of energy turning it into liquid. So it's ideal. It's full of protein, it's liquid. She can make from that blood meal, she can make 100 or even 150 eggs.
So when a mosquito bites, they take the blood because it helps in their reproduction. Why does it itch us so much and we get swollen? And
just before she's going to suck the blood, she injects into you a tiny amount of an anticoagulant, and also we believe possibly a little painkiller as well. But the anticoagulant obviously is to stop the blood clotting so that she can suck up the blood very quickly. It's that in her saliva, it's the chemicals in her saliva, that anticoagulant, and possibly an analgesic.
I feel like I'm watching a horror movie, imagining this great big giant mosquito flying down.
One of the things about the needle, if you like, that they put in to suck the blood, it's also movable, unlike a hypodermic syringe needle. It moves around to find the blood. So that's why mosquitoes take blood. It's purely to make...
Sort of search around for the blood.
Yeah.
How long from the time a mosquito lands until they do their business, get the blood, and leave? How long is that on average?
30 seconds. Varies really. Say the mosquito coming out the salt marsh mosquito. It will come and it will land, it will sit there, it will bite, it won't move. You can flick it. You can pull its wings off if you want. It will just sit there. The disease carrier that we were talking about, the dengue mosquito, the Aedes aegypti is scientific name, very, very different strategy. It will bounce around you. So it may take a couple of minutes to get a full blood meal, but it may bite several times.
And quite possibly what you're saying is one of the reasons we don't feel it sometimes is because they put some anesthesia in there, because it makes their job a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Although I think the main reason, the main constituent of her saliva is the anticoagulant. It's not to make you feel any better. But one of the big consequences of this, of course, is that males don't bite. Male mosquitoes don't bite. They can't bite. They don't have the piercing mouth parts. They have a straw, like a butterfly. Butterflies take nectar from flowers. So male and female mosquitoes take nectar from flowers for energy, for flight energy. They don't grow. They don't have to maintain a body temperature, so they only need it for flight energy mostly. But the blood is purely for making eggs.
Okay, when you mentioned lots of times the mosquitoes stay in the area, now that you brought up about wind, doesn't the wind blow them around?
Yeah, they're pretty good at avoiding the wind, actually. We've noticed even when it was very, very windy conditions, we can get high numbers of mosquitoes in traps. They fly very close to surfaces and avoid the turbulence of the winds out there. Okay. Or they may just hunker down. They may just hide.
Okay, inquiring minds want to know, have you ever stuck your hand into one of those traps to where the mosquitoes fly all over your hand? What do you call that?
What we do have to do is stick our hand in a mosquito cage, not a trap, but a cage for rearing them, in order to give them blood to produce eggs. Yes.
You give them blood from a volunteer's hand.
Yes. These days, it's kind of frowned upon.
Do I have this right? Am I seeing this correctly?
Of all the disease issues these days, it's kind of frowned upon. But when we do it, we know that those mosquitoes are not carrying any disease.
So
those are mosquitoes that we have.
Some of your teammates put their hands in and they get bit up to feed them.
Correct.
But okay, all right.
So it does seem a bit bizarre. It stings.
Yeah, there it is.
There you go. I'll just leave that with you.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to do that periodically. There are devices you can get laboratory devices, automatic blood feeders, so you can get horse blood or cow blood, whatever. And it has to warm it up and so on and so on.
So if you have the mosquitoes in their container and they don't get blood, they're not going to have eggs.
That's true for nearly all mosquitoes. There are some mosquitoes, and the one that comes out of the Everglades, and the salt marsh mosquito, it is very, very different in that if it doesn't get blood, it can produce a small amount of eggs, maybe 10, 20, up to 40. If it does get blood, again, a huge amount of eggs.
Okay, so the Everglades,
it's unusual.
So the Everglades are just west of us, and it's a wonderful place for all sorts of critters. And in the mosquito arena, it seems to be like a great big place for them. Do a lot of those mosquitoes, besides the ones you're talking about, those are the ones that are over there that come over into our homes, or do they mostly stay in the?
No, the black salt marsh mosquito travels. It moves. This one that back in the 50s, actually, in southern Florida, people measured it traveling as much as 30 miles, blown on the wind, or wind assisted, but nonetheless, no, they'll travel. So that one does.
We have a piece of property right near the levee, 260th Street. So one day I go down there. One of the guys is in one of the big cages for animals down there. He is dressed here, everywhere. He cannot see any skin, including on the face, because the amount of mosquitoes were so intense.
Yeah.
How often does that occur?
So that's a good question, because it's sporadic. It only happens. What happens is you got none of these mosquitoes. You got zero. This is something that people didn't understand for a very long time, and then all of a sudden you get an emergence of millions and billions of them. You've got a synchronous emergence, is what's happened. Again, these mosquito eggs are all sitting there in the mud, and the peat in the mud or on the soil. They just sit there and wait. The tide comes in, or it rains, or both, and these mosquitoes can breed in salt water, again, unique. So all these eggs hatch, and then in a few days, the adults emerge, and that's why you get this mass emergence.
And how long do they live, mosquitoes, more or less?
A couple of weeks. I mean, males only live a few days. The females, 2 to 3 weeks in the wild. So, I wanted to go back. Sorry, Michael. I wanted to go back to Dr. Phil Stoddart, because you mentioned
former mayor of South Miami for many years,
and because 2017, 2018, we conducted a pilot study here that Dr. Stoddart had
here in South Miami.
Here in South Miami, not far from here actually. I think it's only about half a mile from here or so on. Where we did a pilot study. It was a small study to look for new methods to control this disease mosquito, the Aedes aegypti, dengue, Zika, chikungunya, yellow fever. The same mosquito.
Just so people understand, those are real diseases, all right? They can affect us.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right. And they're real diseases that are affecting people right now.
Yes.
As we speak. We were trying out one of several innovative techniques to try and control this mosquito. And this technique uses a bacterium called Wolbachia. And what people were able to do in the laboratory was insert this bacterium into mosquitoes. What it does is, one of the things it does, it makes the males sterile. It makes the male mosquitoes sterile. So what you can do, you can breed up hundreds of thousands of these male mosquitoes, which is what the company Mosquito Mate did, the company we collaborated with. What you then do, Michael, you then release hundreds of thousands of these.
This was in the Keys. Was that in the Florida Keys?
They're doing in the Keys now. What we did here, released thousands and thousands of sterile male mosquitoes 2 or 3 times a week. We did that for about 6 months. It was millions altogether. It was a great project. It worked really well.
What was it that you were trying to accomplish?
So what you're trying to do is that these male mosquitoes are sterile. If they mate, when they mate with the female mosquitoes, which are already out there in nature, the eggs that she lays won't hatch. So if you keep doing this and you keep releasing these males, and you've got enough of these males to outnumber the wild males, the natural males that are there, then all of these female mosquitoes are going to be laying eggs, which won't
But
hatch.
do the females lay eggs without breeding, or because
No,
of breeding?
they have to mate beforehand. And that's another thing about mosquitoes. Typically they'll mate before taking blood. But one thing that's very important is the female mosquito is able to store the sperm. She has these tiny little sacs where she's able to store the sperm. So she only needs to mate once, store the sperm, and that's it. And that's very, very difficult to do biochemically.
So how long can they store viable sperm?
For several weeks. For several weeks.
And then, but by that point, the daddy's gone. He's dead.
The males
sole function.
The males mate with as many females as they possibly can in a short space of time, and then that's it. So the female stores the sperm, so she has that. When she lays her eggs, say 5 days later, the eggs are fertilized as they're laid.
Amazing.
In their system.
So
and she has enough so that if she then comes back and bites you again, gets another blood meal, and makes another set of eggs, which she can do, she will have enough sperm to fertilize those eggs when
so
they're laid.
Inquiring minds want to know, doctor, what do you do during the day? You're not the guy going out there spraying.
It's very varied. One of the good things about the job is it's so varied. I mean, it may be, it's very hands-on. I like to be hands-on at talking to people. This time of year, we're doing a lot of equipment, calibrations and so on in preparation for the rains coming. Getting reports from people in the field. We have a lot of people in the field every day. And when they come back in, talking to them, seeing what kind of larvae they've found, how many larvae they have found.
That's ongoing all the time.
Yes.
And how many people in the department?
So we've got up to 64 now.
Okay.
And that's one thing that Zika changed. Zika changed the Miami-Dade Mosquito Control from a small, not very well-funded agency. And the county realized that something had to change. So we now have over 60 people, a lot of equipment,
so
good support.
Getting back to Key West and the males, I remember on mosquitoes, there was a big stink about it, which is don't let the males, everything's gonna be off balance and the nature's gonna be changed. So what was that conversation like with the people that were against that? And do you recall that?
I think that was to do more with the fact that the male mosquitoes were made sterile by genetic means rather than using this bacterium. There are different ways to make the male sterile. The older techniques going back to the 50s used X-rays or chemicals. It doesn't work very well with mosquitoes, but did with other insects. More modern techniques using genetically modified mosquitoes. That was where the controversy was, certainly in the Keys. There are other places we used genetically modified mosquitoes, male mosquitoes, in the Cayman Islands where I worked before. And there, interestingly, the general public, residents, and they're very, very knowledgeable about mosquitoes. They are much more supportive of genetically modified sterile males than using a bacterium. There's a cultural and historical difference.
I want to make sure I understand this correctly. They are mosquito farms. They raise mosquitoes.
Yeah.
I know.
Factories, they call them now.
They call them factories?
They do now.
Mosquito factories.
Yeah.
And these are in self-contained, they're in a cage of sorts, like animals might be in a cage. So,
yes.
Right. And let's say, like in one of those bottles, traps, where you would put your hand in, how many mosquitoes are in that little guy, in that container?
That depends on how your system works. The pilot study we did here in the city of South Miami, releasing the male mosquitoes, we had tubes about so long, which each contained 1,000 males, 1,000 males per tube.
And you let those loose here?
Yes.
And how many did you let out, more or less?
You know, I can't remember how many it was. It was millions. It was lots, Michael.
All right.
It was lots. I should remember, but I don't.
Okay,
It was
all right.
lots.
So, if Phil, if I see you, I mean, Dr. Stoddard, please remind me to ask you. So what occurred after you let, millions of mosquitoes, sterilized male mosquitoes here in South Miami? What occurred because of that?
So what we were able to show, and there is a scientific publication to show, it's peer reviewed. You have to go through a lot of academia procedure to get these published. We were able to show, though, that there was a reduction of around about 75% in the local population of the female mosquitoes.
Okay. And how long does that take for that to occur?
One of the problems or challenges with that kind of technique is that you have to keep doing it. You have to keep releasing the males. The population crashes. That's the idea, is that you want the population to crash. So when it does, you should be able then to keep doing it, but with far, far fewer males to keep the system going, theoretically. These systems they're very promising. They haven't got to the stage yet, Michael, of commercialization, if you like.
And inquiring minds also want to know, how much does 100 do? A tube full of mosquitoes, if it was tube was 5,000 mosquitoes.
I actually don't know the answer to that question, and if I did know, I'd probably not be allowed to say.
Okay.
I don't know what that company, Mosquito Mate, they were actually FedExing those mosquitoes down to us.
Excuse me for laughing. I mean, it's just as, and Monique said, no, this is really serious stuff. It is. I understand that. So in lots of areas, people have of town, there's a lot of shrubbery, a lot of landscaping. I know when I go down to Homestead, there are lots of nurseries, and the ground is always wet because they're watered. That helps make more mosquitoes. What about downtown, where it's almost all concrete except for the bay? What's it like there?
So again, you see, these are good questions, because somewhere like downtown, why do we keep finding mosquitoes there?
Yes.
Why do the traps pick them up? Well, one of the sources is storm drains, and that's a real issue in Miami and other large urban areas. Storm drains breed, especially one particular type of mosquito that's hard to control. It's also a disease carrier. It transmits West Nile virus, so it's a kind of a nasty thing as well. So that mosquito can breed in storm drains and foul water, septic tanks. So you can find it. Disused swimming pools is another.
So this is not one of those things you go paint the walls and you're done for 10 years and go back and paint it. This is all the time management of it.
Absolutely.
And again, I was down south walking around one of the plant nurseries, and I love walking through the mud puddles, but that's every day. That's down there. Big trees, lots of shadows and shade. So tell us about the mosquitoes' desire to get out of the sunlight and get into shadier areas. They do that because they're going to get burned up by the sun?
They get dried out. Mosquitoes are like many insects, not all insects, but many insects. They're prone to drying out. They like humidity. Yeah. They like high humidity, so they don't like air conditioning. That dries them out.
So imagine driving around on a golf cart, 400 longans trees. You're with somebody and they said, can I go pick some of those longans? I said, sure, I'll wait for you right over here. So, and they got to pull that and in a moment they're covered.
So I am not one to advocate getting rid of shrubbery or trees or vegetation. The exact opposite, on the contrary. So what we have to be able to do is to manage it. And we have products now. I mentioned a product called BTI. It's worth repeating because this product kills the mosquito larvae. And one of the wonderful things about this product is it doesn't kill anything else. It only kills mosquito larvae and black fly larvae. We don't have black fly, so they're also a nuisance. So this product only kills those organisms. It's entirely safe for everything else.
And where do you put it?
You put it wherever mosquitoes are breeding. So for the average house owner, for example, we mentioned bromeliads. Disease mosquitoes breed in bromeliads. You can sprinkle these granules of this BTI, or wherever you can use them wherever. It's a product that comes in many different formulations, and we use one of the formulations in a special piece of equipment that we have to try and get this BTI product into the breeding sites. The story behind this BTI, it's a bacterium. Again, it's a naturally occurring bacterium, a bacillus, which is a natural pathogen of mosquitoes. It was discovered in Israel in the Negev desert accidentally. They found that this bacterium was lethal to mosquito larvae. So these guys, they bred it, they reared it, they developed, it took a long time. The bacterium is called Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis.
Monique, you got this down?
Hence the BTI. And that bacterium is very, very effective and fast at killing mosquito larvae. So it's a great product.
So there are lots of folks, especially in more wealthy areas, they would have waterfalls by their pools, and the chlorine water goes into their waterfalls, and then comes back into the pool. But there's a lot of areas that it just sits, and it just sits there until it evaporates. Does the chlorine that's in the water on those waterfalls typically kill it, or after a couple of days the chlorine's out?
No, the chlorine, disused, discarded swimming pools are a real problem for us. But fountains, the chlorine will dissipate. It will evaporate out of the water. One of the great things to use there is mosquito fish.
Mosquito fish.
Where appropriate, and you can't use them.
You say fish?
In all settings.
Fish?
There is a fish here called gambusia. Mosquito fish is what they're called. It belongs here. It's a native. It's not an invasive species. And it's called mosquito fish because they love to eat mosquito larvae. That's what they do. So we use them. We put them in swimming pools or fountains. They're very useful.
It's a live fish.
It's a live fish. It's a gambusia. It's a guppy. It's only about so long, but they love to eat mosquito larvae.
There's a neighborhood fish farm on 45th Street. Richard, you're welcome. All right. That's out there. And they have about 25, 30, 40 tanks, concrete tanks, waters, about this deep. They have the fish that are there. When the mosquitoes go there, when they get in, because obviously they do, and they lay the eggs, and it's up against the side on the inside there, and the water rises a little bit. Do the fish tend to eat the eggs, the mosquito eggs, as they're floating around, or they
the fish would eat the larvae, but in that case, the mosquito's not going to lay her eggs.
Why? They just know not to do that.
She's not. She knows there's fish in there. She's not going to do that.
I know, it's amazing. All right.
There was actually a study. Again, it was in Florida. I don't think it was Miami. I think it was up in Vero Beach, where they discovered that female mosquitoes were testing the water with their feet. They have really highly sensitive detectors on their feet. And
my brain cells are getting fried right now.
This study showed that they were able to determine, or it looked as if they were able to determine whether there were fish present in that water.
That is amazing. You think about this tiny little critter with a little tiny thing that can store the sperm, all right, that knows how to get food, knows how to reproduce, all right, knows that the father's going to be gone shortly, all right, and that can test the water to see if there's some prey, whether the eggs are going to get eaten or not, to go someplace a little safer.
It's a highly adapted, biologically, a highly adapted organism. I think you just described it wonderfully, Michael. It's and this is what makes it such a challenge, such a difficult thing to control.
So you went to school in Sweden. Did you grow up there?
Scotland.
In Scotland, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You grew up in Scotland.
Yes.
When did you realize you wanted to be the mosquito doctor?
I got offered a job after I'd graduated in Scotland. I got offered a job in mosquito control in the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean.
This before your doctorate, or was that undergraduate?
Yes, that was before my doctorate. Yeah.
Okay.
So I took the opportunity, took the job. I hadn't thought about mosquito control as a job, but I took who wouldn't take a job in the Cayman Islands?
Well, that in itself is fine.
For and studying mosquitoes there. There's a very well established mosquito agency in the Cayman Islands, been there since the 60s. And so that's how I got into the.
That's extraordinary that out of all the arenas that you could have been, that you chose that. And as you describe these mosquitoes, you've almost humanized them, right? On how they were able to do that. And Monique's nodding her head. Sure enough, it's really quite amazing. You really laid out a tremendous picture about the adaptability of these creatures.
They're highly adapted. They've been doing this for far, far longer than we've been around. We have found mosquitoes in amber, resin from trees, and those mosquitoes 25 28 million years old. Those mosquitoes look like exactly the same as
like that cockroach
as the
backyard.
ones. Hey, it's probably the same deal. So they've been doing it for a very long time, highly adapted to it.
So we have our mosquito season come up. When is the peak going to be, more or less?
Our peak mosquito season here, from the data I have looked at, is August, September, October.
That's right around our hurricane season.
It coincides with hurricane season. As I said earlier on, the predictability is not as good as it used to be, depending upon the rainfalls and tides. We also get affected by tides here, the tidal flooding into the mangroves.
We're leaving that to Miami Beach over there, and whoever is in charge of the Everglades on the other side. As I mentioned before, we have some property that's a few blocks from the levee, way down south. And when it was flooded, all right, when we bought the property, I said to the old owner, "So how often does it flood?" He says, "Every couple, once in a while." "Where's the flood?" He points over yonder. And I said, "So what about the fruit? How often?" He says, "Every year, this is what we get." I said, "What about the mosquitoes? When does that come up?" "Every once in a while." Well, that year we had the two back-to-back floods. All right.
Yeah.
Every long end was blown off the tree, and trees said it was the worst mosquito outbreak in a decade. So nature is always there, right?
Indeed.
And tell people just again one of the things that they can do to protect themselves and their families.
People can actually do something about some of the mosquito species, not all of them. People can actually check your backyard. If you don't have a backyard, even the veranda, balcony, or even round about your property, same for your business. And remove standing water. Turn over anything that can hold water. If you can't turn it over, treat it with the BTI bits. Bromeliads are another source. Anything that can hold water like that, remove it. And for yourself personally, insect repellents do work. They do function. They work. You can also put them on your clothes if you don't like putting repellent directly on the skin. A good idea is to spray repellent on a hat. If you wear a cap, that certainly keeps the mosquitoes from around your head. It certainly puts them off. Those are the kind of things that people can do to help themselves.
Well, our folks have never met a director of mosquito control from Miami-Dade County, Dr. William Petrie. And thank you very much for being here. It's been a pleasure. And we are glad that you're here to share this with us, something that we're all familiar with your mosquitoes. We never heard them humanized like this before. And again, we're gonna wrap it up here. Again, thank you very much.
I would just say, Michael, that look at it from the mosquito's point of view. She's just making babies. She doesn't even know she's giving you viruses or malaria, right?
Yeah, and he has empathy for them too. Folks, thanks for joining us again. Michael, Tommy, thanks for producing the show. Monique, thanks for being here. Again, this is Live with Miami's Community News. Our guest today, Dr. William Petrie, Director of Mosquito Control.